The world is watching closely as Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy meets with Canadian Prime Minister Carney in a high-stakes diplomatic encounter that could reshape the next phase of international support for Ukraine. This meeting is not just another routine diplomatic visit. It comes at a critical moment in the war, as Ukraine continues to face relentless pressure from Russia, while Western unity is being tested like never before. From military aid and economic recovery to global security and democratic values, the discussions between Zelenskyy and Carney signal a deeper alignment between Kyiv and Ottawa and a message to the world that Ukraine is not standing alone. As President Zelenskyy arrived in Canada, the symbolism of the visit was impossible to ignore. Canada has been one of Ukraine's strongest allies since the very first days of the Russian invasion, providing military equipment, financial assistance, humanitarian aid, and unwavering diplomatic support. Now, with Carney stepping into leadership and positioning Canada as a renewed global force, this meeting marks the beginning of a new chapter in Canada-Ukraine relations. It reflects continuity, but also escalation and understanding that the stakes are higher. The war is longer, and the consequences of inaction are far more dangerous. At the heart of the talks was military assistance. President Zelenskyy made it clear that Ukraine urgently needs sustained and advanced military support to defend its territory and protect its civilians. Air defense systems, long-range capabilities, armored vehicles, and ammunition were key points of discussion. Zelenskyy emphasized that Ukraine is not asking for charity, but for partnership, arguing that every weapon sent to Ukraine is an investment in global stability. Prime Minister Carney responded by reaffirming Canada's commitment to Ukraine's defense, signaling that Ottawa understands the war is not just a regional conflict, but a direct challenge to the rules-based international order. Beyond weapons and defense, economic support played a central role in the meeting. Ukraine's economy has been severely damaged by years of war, targeted strikes on infrastructure, and constant uncertainty. Zelenskyy outlined Ukraine's urgent financial needs, including budgetary support, reconstruction funding, and investment guarantees. Prime Minister Carney, with his background in global finance and economics, acknowledged that rebuilding Ukraine will require not only government aid but long-term private investment and international coordination. The two leaders discussed mechanisms to attract Canadian businesses to participate in Ukraine's reconstruction, particularly in energy, infrastructure, agriculture, and technology. Energy security was another major focus of the discussions. Russia has repeatedly targeted Ukraine's power grid in an attempt to break civilian morale and cripple the country's ability to function. Zelenskyy highlighted the need for modern energy solutions, decentralized power systems, and international expertise to protect Ukraine from future attacks. Canada, with its experience in energy production and sustainable technologies, expressed readiness to assist Ukraine in building a more resilient and modern energy sector, one that is less vulnerable to sabotage and political blackmail. The meeting also addressed the humanitarian toll of the war. Millions of Ukrainians have been displaced, families have been torn apart, and countless civilians continue to live under the threat of missile strikes. Zelenskyy thanked Canada for welcoming Ukrainian refugees and providing humanitarian assistance, calling it a lifeline for those forced to flee their homes. Prime Minister Carney reaffirmed Canada's commitment to supporting Ukrainian civilians, both inside the country and abroad, emphasizing that humanitarian aid remains a moral obligation, not a political calculation. One of the most powerful moments of the meeting came when both leaders spoke about accountability and justice. Zelenskyy reiterated Ukraine's demand that Russia be held accountable for war crimes, aggression, and violations of international law. He stressed that peace without justice would only invite future wars. Prime Minister Carney echoed this position, stating that Canada supports international efforts to investigate and prosecute those responsible for crimes committed during the war. This shared stance sends a strong message that the international community cannot allow impunity to prevail. Diplomatically, the meeting served as a signal to other Western nations. At a time when some countries are debating the cost of continued support for Ukraine, the Zelenskyy-Carney meeting reinforced the idea that unity must not weaken. Both leaders emphasized that wavering support would only embolden authoritarian aggression, not bring peace. Zelenskyy warned that any sign of fatigue from Ukraine's allies would be interpreted by Moscow as an opportunity to escalate. Carney agreed, underscoring that defending democracy requires long-term commitment, not short-term political convenience. The discussions also touched on NATO and broader global security. Zelenskyy reiterated Ukraine's desire for deeper integration with Western security structures, arguing that Ukraine's battlefield experience and resilience make it a valuable partner. While acknowledging the complexities involved, Prime Minister Carney expressed support for Ukraine's Euro-Atlantic aspirations and emphasized Canada's role in strengthening NATO's eastern flank. The meeting reinforced the idea that Ukraine's security is inseparable from the security of Europe and North America. Public reaction to the meeting has been largely positive, both in Canada and internationally. Supporters see it as proof that Ukraine still has strong allies willing to stand firm despite political and economic pressures. Analysts note that Carney's global reputation adds weight to Canada's commitments, potentially influencing other nations to maintain or increase their support for Ukraine. For Ukrainians, the visit offered reassurance that their struggle has not been forgotten and that their sacrifices continue to matter on the world stage. Critics, however, have raised concerns about the financial cost of continued support and the risk of prolonged confrontation with Russia. In response, both leaders were clear in their messaging. The cost of supporting Ukraine now is far lower than the cost of dealing with a world where aggression goes unchecked. Zelenskyy argued that Ukraine is effectively holding the line against a broader threat, while Carney emphasized that peace built on weakness is never sustainable. As the meeting concluded, the tone was one of determination rather than uncertainty. There were no illusions about how difficult the road ahead will be. The war is far from over, and challenges remain immense. Yet, the Zelenskyy-Carney meeting demonstrated that Ukraine's allies are adapting, recalibrating, and preparing for a long-term commitment rather than searching for quick exits. It showed that leadership, when grounded in principle, can still shape global events. In the final statements, President Zelenskyy thanked Canada and its people for standing with Ukraine during its darkest hours. He spoke not only as a wartime leader, but as a representative of a nation fighting for its survival and its right to choose its own future. Prime Minister Carney responded by reaffirming that Canada's support for Ukraine is rooted in shared values: freedom, democracy, and respect for international law, and that these values are worth defending, even when it is difficult. This meeting between Zelenskyy and Carney may not end the war tomorrow, but it strengthens the foundation for Ukraine's resistance and recovery. It reinforces global solidarity at a moment when unity is under pressure. And it sends a clear message to the world. Ukraine's fight is not isolated, and the resolve of its allies remains strong. As history continues to unfold, this moment may be remembered as one where commitment was renewed, lines were redrawn, and the future of international order was defended, not with words alone, but with action.